Okay, now I'm addressing both in-class and distance students, okay? Um, First thing I'm going to say, the number one thing, do not use AI or any other online resource other than your text in the materials to do your homework problems, okay? What that leads to is people have great homework grades, that's 5% of your grade. And the other 95%, they make 12%. Because they don't learn anything, because you can't learn anything if you let something else do your homework for you or somebody else. Okay, so you understand the principle. And I say that because over half the students that register for this course or the distance course, especially true in the distance course, but it's true in the in-class course, use something to do their homework and then can't do it when they're asked to do it on a test. Now, in this class, you're going to be asked to do it the next day on a quiz. Okay, so you're going to have an assignment, you're going to learn how to do the stuff, you're going to be asked very similar problems on a quiz. And that quiz is going to be 10% of your grade. Okay, that's still not a huge proportion of your grade because in order to master the material, you have to bring it together and pass a test. And there's another place where I find that people have some difficulty because people don't appear to know how to prepare for a test. So we'll be talking about how you can do that, okay? And as we get close to the test, I'll give you some sample problems, okay? Ask you to do some things. Most people don't do it, and most people don't do as well as they could on the test, although many people get by okay, right? So you got to do your work. You've got to engage the problems. You've got to think them through. It doesn't mean you can't be looking at your text for similar problems. It doesn't mean you can't look at the videos that are provided through Open Math to see how this is worked out. But you have to understand what you're doing. You have to work to understand, okay? So work for understanding, not just for getting homework points. If your goal is just to get these homework points, it's only 5% of your grade, okay? That could make a difference. 5% is still significant. So if you use AI to do all your homework, you're going to get that 5%. That might be all you get, but you're going to get the 5%. I'm not going to check that. I can't distinguish. Sometimes I can. People use AI for a much more advanced course and give me an answer based on differential calculus for a intermediate algebra course. Okay, I can tell. I don't think they did that. I don't penalize it. I don't check that. You're welcome to do it, but please don't. Okay. That 5% is unlikely to determine whether you pass or fail this course. Okay. Matter of fact, if you pass a test, see if you got a 0% of your homework, maybe you decide, I just want to let AI teach me this instead of do the problems. I want to let AI. Can you help me work through? Can you teach me? Okay. I've seen examples of that. Okay. And AI does a pretty good job of that. And if you find that's a good way for you to learn, have at it. But still learn to do the problems that you're going to have for homework. Okay? One way or another. And don't let AI do those problems. Let AI teach you the topic. Let AI teach you what you need to know in order to do the problems. But do the problems yourself, even if you don't do well on it. Because then I can see, okay, you're having trouble with this. Okay, well, let's talk about this a little bit in the next class, or let me insert a note into your homework here that maybe get you straight, okay? Does that make sense? It's not a bad way to there are, I think I mentioned sources, it's free. Or you can get a bound copy of these texts for $50 or something. I don't require those texts because most people wouldn't use them. Okay, but I think it's good to have a text in your hand. And you do have that option, or you can print sections of the text out. You can print stuff out in the library. Okay, in small parts, staple them, keep track of them. Okay, whatever parts you need, you're allowed to do that. Okay. All right, now there is a text in Open Math, and if you've done what I asked on Canvas and, registered for Open Math and maybe even done the how to use Open Math assignment, which takes people on average about 12 minutes. And if you've used it before, you already know, okay? So that's something I've already pretty much assigned that in some of the emails. You get that done by the first class, if not before the start of the second class. So make sure you know how to use Open Math. I'll get it yet. Okay. Make sure you know how to use it. Well, anyhow. And you have an assignment for next time. I think I'm being redundant to do the introduction to Open Math, which takes just a little bit of time. Okay. Now, I don't have a printed syllabus for you because in the process of renovation, they replaced the doors in the building where the copier is. I was up here till early evening yesterday, getting these tables clean. I even cleaned the cabinets. Okay. I got the tables clean. I got everything clear. Is a little quicker than I thought I would. And I could have gone over and printed out the essence of the syllabus, which I will do for next time, so you can have a copy of that. I'm not going to give you a copy of the whole thing because there's big sections of it that you just need to look at later. And most people don't keep that syllabus, okay? If you do want a copy of the entire syllabus, just tell me and I'll give you one, okay? But it's online. It's on Canvas. Some of you, how many of you read it so far? Anybody read it? Okay. Does it make sense? Of course, I wrote it, so you better tell me that it makes sense. Well, if you have any questions on it, I'll allow questions. Incidentally, anytime you have a question in class, just let me know you have a question. I'll pause the video. And we'll answer your question. Okay. I might say, wait just a second till I write this one thing down, then we'll come right back to it. But usually within 30 seconds, we'll get to your question. Okay. Few things about the syllabus, just so you know what you're into. The main questions people have: how am I going to be graded? You're going to be graded on tests. Tests are proctored over in the testing center. Okay. How many of you know where the testing center is? Okay. Yeah, many of you don't. Someday, necessarily, we can walk over there, but you just walk over to the library, go past the front desk, and there's a glassed-in area. First glassed-in area you see is where the tests are given, or where you go to take the tests. And just outside of that, you have attendants who will sign you in, give you the test, you go in. Okay. On tests for this course, they'll give you a calculator that you can use because people can put a whole textbook on their own calculator. Yeah. You won't have access to anything else. Just go in there and solve problems that you should be able to solve because you've been seeing those problems. We do them in class. We come in, we have a quiz over similar problems. If people have trouble on the quiz, we talk about it, then we talk about new stuff. That makes sense? Now for distance students, because we're also addressing distance students here, what I expect you to do, I'm going to post the videos from class, which is why we don't want anybody talking while the camera's on. I hate that. I prefer pandemonium, everybody talking at once. It's more conducive, but it's kind of important to also have reference to the videos, so we make that sacrifice. Anyhow, videos are going to be posted. My first expectation for distance students is that they will work through those videos the same way people work through the class. And typically in class, I'll introduce something, a little bit of something, I'll ask you to do something. Then I'll circulate around, see how you're doing with it, with the camera off, so distance students don't have a big gap, and I expect distance students to also do what I say, okay? And then I address things that I see people maybe having trouble with, or I say, yeah, everybody did that great, but just be sure, here's how it's done. Now we do the next thing. So you go out of here knowing, at least having a pretty good idea of what's going to be in your homework and how you're going to do it. Does that make sense? Now that's for everybody. The videos are going to be there if you got to review it. Distance students really ought to work through the videos as if they were in class. Although the problem is there that as a distance student, you can't raise your hand and ask a question. But you can always send me a question. I'll answer the questions, okay? Now, if you're a distance student, again, just to address distance students for a second, what I said previously about if you prefer to let AI teach you this stuff, that's fine. You know what the topics are. You have the open math assignments. Open math gives you a text. It gives you videos, gives you examples, gives you all kinds of stuff, okay? Now, just back for everybody, the way I've structured the homework assignments is usually the first few problems on a topic will have a video accompany them. Then later problems of a similar nature don't have the video, okay? Now, really, I expect, if possible, that you go through the video, you make notes, and then you try to work the problem. If you can't work it, go back and look at the video, ask AI something, not how do you solve this problem? Here it is, give me the solution so I can pretend I know it, okay? But give me some explanation here, something I'm not understanding. If you say I'm not understanding this, a good AI is probably going to give you some really good information, okay? And if you don't want to use AI, you know, you have other resources, okay? And you just go to the address window and type in, explain this to me. And you're probably going to get an AI explaining it to you, okay? With some details and some alternatives. You know, you can use that, you feel your way around that, if that's what you want to do. And it's not a bad idea for most people. Another alternative is go back and read the textbook, look at similar examples, look at how it's written out in a textbook. Okay. The other thing is, this is for everybody, you know, write out what you're doing. Don't just scratch a bunch of incoherent symbols on your paper and then say, okay, here's the answer. If you write out what you're doing, you're going to reinforce it. You're going to force yourself to understand it well enough to write it out and show the reasoning and the logic and the steps, okay? Don't skip steps unless you are sure you know it so well that you don't have to write out all the steps. If I ask you to solve x plus 3 equals 5, if I wrote that down, you'd be able to solve it quickly, but x plus 3 equals 5, you'd subtract 3 from both sides and get x equals 2. Or you just know, what do I add to 3 to get 5? Well, that's got to be 2. Okay, duh. Okay, is that totally obvious to you? probably still a good idea to write out the steps, because if you had a quick problem that easy, there's probably going to be another one where you want to be in the habit of writing out your steps. And it'll be easier to solve it. You know, it doesn't take but a few seconds to write out most steps. It's a big, long problem. It can take longer than that. But you understand how you want to maybe approach your homework. Okay? Any of that make sense? Okay, I want to review this. Giving you a lot of good advice here. Back to the grading. Tests have to be proctored. That includes for distance students. You have to come in, take a test. If you're not in this service region, if there's a community college near you, they can probably proctor tests. The tests have to be proctored. That's always been my philosophy since I started developing distance courses in the 90s. Okay, tests were always proctored. Okay, the Virginia Community College system, 30 years later, is starting to say, hey, you gotta be sure your tests are proctored. Okay, duh. How many people have passed these courses by letting AI take their tests for them? I don't know. But from the behaviors I've seen, quite a bit. Okay. So I don't know how it is that people are 30 years late realizing this. I wasn't the only one that realized it then, but I came to the conclusion immediately because I'd seen people trying to cheat in regular classes. Okay. So tests have to be proctored, and that's why they have to be proctored. And we don't use the spy software where you sit there and a camera's on you and shows everything you do. Okay? Because you might just have a little brain implant here. It allows you to look at the problem in front of your glasses. Well, we're not quite there yet, but that's less than 5 years away. Okay. And you can't go to that extreme, but people can still cheat if they're in their own environment and nobody's really watching them. So we don't do that. Plus, I find that really invasive. Okay. I really don't like the idea of Big Brother spying on everything you do. Okay, even though there's quite a bit of that going on. Okay. Your test average is going to determine whether you pass this course. Now, this course is pass or fail. You get an S or a U, or possibly an I if we have a hurricane or something and wipes out half the exam period, or some disaster befalls you, health problem or whatever. I can give an incomplete, and then I usually give you till like the starter classes in the spring. Now, I don't do that just automatically. There's got to be a good reason for it. That was up to me. I just do it automatically, but the system says there has to be a good reason for it. They employ me. I'll follow their rules. Stretch them as far as I can, but I'm going to follow them. At least enough that I can defend myself. Okay. There are probably other aspects of the syllabus. Tests are generally graded on 90, 80, 70, 60 scale, but that sometimes depends on the rigor of the test. And a lot of times, I do kind of a normalization. I'll take sometimes, let's say, 60 is the lowest passing score, but on this test, I think somebody makes a 40 knows enough to go on. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll kind of squeeze the grades from 40 to 100. Okay, now I squeeze from this end. If I'm squeezing from this end, the A's don't get squeezed much at all. Matter of fact, they don't get squeezed at all. Of course, you're not worried about A, B, C, D. You're just worried about pass or fail. Okay. So I might squeeze that up to 50 or 60. If I think in looking at everything that's been done on the test, it's somebody who makes a 40. Yeah, they've got the skills to go on. It was a tough test. Some of these problems are too hard. I'll do that. Don't count on it. Okay. It'll vary from test to test. And I don't do all that much of it in this course because there is stuff you just got to know. Now, the goal of this course is to learn some intermediate algebra so you can take courses that have an intermediate algebra prerequisite. Now, most of our college transfer courses have a prerequisite of a transfer level math course. If you're in a track where you need a pre-calculus, okay, which is the case for most people who are in here, your goal is to get through pre-calculus. The goal of this course is to prepare you for MDE 61, which you take concurrent with pre-calculus, okay? Now, we actually bend the rules a little bit. I probably shouldn't say this and publish it, but we actually can bend the rules a little bit and allow you to take the 61 and then the 161. And I see no reason for that. The way the 61 was originally developed, it was strictly a co-requisite. But as it turns out, people that do the 61 and then the 161 succeed as well or better than people that do them together. It's, for some people, the 61 and the 161 is too many credits in a semester. And it's better if they can do it sequentially. Okay, and sometimes there are valid reasons for wanting to do it that way. Also, maybe the 61 is kind of like a baby 161. We cover the same topics, just not quite the detail and the depth. There are plenty of reasons why you'd want to do that. Now that's in the future. The goal is to get ready for MDE 61, where you refine your introductory algebra or intermediate algebra skills. Okay, last thing I'll mentioned it to some of you before we started. This course is intermediate algebra. My experience is that only about 20% of the people that sign up for this class know enough elementary algebra to start intermediate algebra. So we spend most of September learning elementary algebra and learning it well. Then we find that we can cover most of the important topics in intermediate algebra, the topics that are going to be most important in pre-calculus. Okay, we can cover most of those topics pretty well to the point where people can then take the MDE 61 and succeed. Okay, now some people do it so well that I say, you know, you don't need the MDE 61. You can go right into the 161. I know you can do this because of the quality of your work. And about 20% of the students in this course will typically reach that level. Now, you don't need my permission to just jump into the 161, but people who jump into the 161 without my saying, you're ready to make that jump, almost always fail badly, quickly, okay, in the 161. So make sure that you at least consider what I tell you at the end of the semester, okay? Do your homework in a way that results in your learning it, and use whatever resources get you there. Use the resources appropriately to teach you how to do things, not to do them for you. Make sense? please follow that advice. Okay, the best advice I can give you at this point. I might learn something, but you know, I'm at the age where you don't learn anything anymore, so. Okay, no, every semester I learn something. So, and we're gonna learn things about AI, how people can use AI, because I haven't really addressed that in class up to this point. So I'm not gonna teach you about AI. Assume you, and if you use the internet to search for things, you are using AI. But how can you use it in the most appropriate manner? Okay. Okay, well, let's do a little bit of simple algebra. Because I'm going to ask you, I've given everybody, I think, a blank sheet of paper. I think it came in late, I didn't, but got some here, I'll get you one. Okay. Because I'm going to want to take these up when you're done, but I'm going to put some problems on the board, much the way we do it in class, and ask you to work them, and I'll kind of circulate around, and then I'll make some comments, kind of help you on if you're having trouble. I just want kind of a record of where you are when you start, so I can refer back to it. And if you hand me a piece of paper, well, there's one thing I want to talk about. If you hand me a piece of paper, it needs to be a regular 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper without holes in it, not torn out of a notebook. It's got to be full size, full thickness, because I'll feed these through the copier. So I can keep a copy and give you one back. Okay? Make sense? And if you give me non-standard paper, I can't feed it through the copier. You don't want to damage the copier because it's a real pain when it starts eating your paper. Takes up a lot of time that I could be spending doing something else to confuse you. Okay. And again, addressing everybody, including distance students, there will be problems in your homework where I say, or there will be assignments where I say, send me a copy of your work. Okay. That copy should be in PDF form. Almost everybody has the ability to take a picture and put it into PDF format. Almost any smartphone will do that. Now, I don't have a smartphone and I don't want one. My posture is bad enough without, and my thumbs, you know, I'm doing some construction at the house. My thumbs got to work for that. They don't have to work for smartphone. I'll use a typewriter. Okay. I have no use for smartphone because I pretty much know everything anyway. Seriously, if I need it, I'll use the computer because it's faster. And then I'm not interrupting my life every 5 minutes for a smartphone. Now, you don't have to have the same philosophy. Okay. You don't have to take the same attitude toward that stuff that I do. I mean, I'm usually way ahead of the curve on technology. Always have been. But I think smartphones have some really neat uses. There's some things I regret not being able to do. There's some pretty good technology involved, but it's not worth the price to me of living my life through a smartphone. Okay? Just in the opposite habits. I tend to screw up things myself without a smartphone. Okay. So I prefer that things come in PDF. I do not want, if you got 5 pages, I don't want 5 JPEGs. I can handle JPEGs okay. You have to put your JPEGs into one file. Okay. And the ways to do that, it's easy. People have no problem doing it, but if you don't know how, don't ask me, because I prefer to stay smartphone illiterate. But email me, I'll ask the class, hey, how do you guys do it? Or go over to the MARC. You know what the MARC is? It's our tutoring center. Now, if you're a distance student, you can't go over to the MARC. Or maybe you can. Maybe there are days when you do come to campus and you're just taking this course distance. But there are people who can help you, even the help desk. But email me, I ask everybody, I get you a solution pretty quickly. Isn't a bad idea, assuming people will answer my emails. How do you put a bunch of JPEGs into one file? I mean, it's simple. On almost any smartphone. However, if you have the option to put them in a PDF, it's even better, because I can actually sometimes insert comments into a PDF and send it back to you. Can't do that with a JPEG. Okay. And I can't always do that. That's pretty time consuming, and my highest priority is to get the videos posted, make sure the assignments are clear, compare assignments, provide various kinds of help, answer emails. Okay. And if there's time, then sometimes I can put comments into a PDF. Or if it's really important, if I think I can really clarify this thing for you on this one problem, well, it doesn't take that long. Okay. So that's how we'll approach that. Okay. But you will, on every assignment, I think maybe 30% of the assignment is send me your work. Not every assignment, but on most assignments, I think. So that I can look at how you're approaching the work. And then I see what you do in quizzes when you come to class. And I get a picture of how you work and what you need to know, and how I need to work with you. Fair enough? Okay. Now, I'm going to ask if there are any questions after I pause this thing, and I don't pause it with camera, I pause it with Zoom. Okay, I'm going to put a couple of questions on the board, a couple of problems, and just want you to work them. Show me all the steps. Okay, like even the one I told you how to do. Okay, that one ought to be easy. Don't just say x equals 2. Show me how you get x equals 2. And then three x plus 4 equals 13. Okay. Let's just see how people do on these problems. Okay, these, another thing about this camera, there's a big blur right about here on the screen. That's very, very disconcerting. And I've asked about getting some kind of a backup camera. So we're going to have to kind of deal with that blur, but I'll try to work around it. Okay. So the problems: x plus 3 equals 5, 3x plus 4 equals 13, 2 times the quantity x minus 5 plus 6 equals 10, x over 5 plus 4 equals 7, 5 over x minus 2 equals 9. Now, these last two problems have some denominators, and people often don't know what to do with that. And if you're among them, well, you're probably among the majority of people who've come into this class before. And we'll talk a little bit about that in case you need that. Show the steps, do your best, and I'm going to pause the video and just walk around and see how you're doing. Okay, well, we're having some problems with the camera. It's gonna have to be resolved rather quickly, just make sure it's in focus. Right now, I got a big bright blur here and a couple others over here, and these weren't here before, and that was worse than it used to be. So we're gonna work around that, but that's all we can do right now. Okay, so let's just work through these. We got X plus 3 equals 5. And of course, the way to write this out, we're not going to solve this by inspection. Okay? We're going to solve this by writing out the equation like this. Now, there's another way that most people are writing it out, but we're subtracting 3 from both sides because certainly 3 minus 3 is 0, which will leave us X. And 5 minus 3 is 2. Now, there's one thing I didn't ask you to do, but I'm going to ask you to do it on all your homework. I want you to check your solutions. Okay, so we check. Well, I actually write this out. It doesn't take long to write it out. And I'm writing out the logic of what I do. Say X plus 3 equals 5. If X equals 2, which is what we got for our solution, then 2 plus 3 equals 5. Okay? I just put a check mark if it's obviously true, right? But I'm going to say this is true. So there's the logic of checking and the logic of solving the problem. Now there's another way. Yeah, we're recording. There's another way the problem could be solved. Or yeah, another way it could be written out. Okay. Most people are doing something like this, but most people are just writing a minus 3 here and a minus 3 here without an equal sign. Well, I kind of want to see that equal sign because writing a minus 3 and a minus 3 has no meaning. It's just a couple of numbers floating out there. If you put an equal sign on it, it's an equation that can be added to another equation. So here we're adding 2 equations. Not just some magical thing where we write a number here and a number here and do something with it. Because, well, among other things, there are some serious mistakes that occur when people do that. So if we add these 2, well, I say, okay, you can do this. You can add the 2 sides. And the 3 and the negative 3 give you 0. Actually, when you add these 2 equations, this is what you get. This side is X plus 3, this side is minus 3. So you add those, you get X plus 3 minus 3. This side is 5, this side is minus 3, so you get 5 minus 3. If you add these 2 equations, you get this. Okay? I really don't particularly like this way of doing it because of what often happens on the second problem. Okay, I'll show you what I mean right now. Okay, so now, if you wrote it out this way, and I didn't tell you to check, but if you then check's going to look exactly like this does, and it's going to come out right. Okay. Now, again, you can see that the solution is 2, and that's good. But as I've said, on most problems, you're not going to be able to do it by inspection. So go ahead and solve it by inspection, but then write out the steps so you reinforce these steps. So you know what you're doing at every stage, okay? So that when you get a problem that's got a little bit of a twist in it, you still know what the steps ought to look like. Okay, it's not different every time you solve a problem. You have the same rules for every problem. Reinforce the rules and make sure you're using the rules. Okay, now we got 3x plus 4 equals 14. 13, sorry. Okay, now what do we do here? Well, we subtract 4 from both sides. I'll go ahead and do it the way you all have probably been taught to do it, okay? I encourage you to also write it out this way, at least on a few problems, to keep reminding yourself of what's really happening. As a matter of fact, I am going to write it out that way. So we add these, it really gives us 3x plus 4 minus 4 equals 13 minus 4, or 3x equals 9. If you skip this step, get this one right, it's okay. Okay? I'm not going to count it wrong. I'm just recommending that for these fairly simple linear equations, you do this sort of thing. Fair enough? Because I want you to understand what's really going on. And then what? 3x equals 9. 3x divided by 3 equals 9 divided by 3. Well, this 3 divides this 3 and gives you 1. I don't like crossing things out because people make too many mistakes with cancellation. But 3 is a factor of the denominator. It's a factor of the numerator, and that's why you can do it. People do it when you don't have factors. And that's why I, again, don't like to even talk about cancellation. Although it's handy and convenient. Then we check. I'm going to say if x equals 3, and 3x plus 4 equals 13 becomes 3 times 3 plus 4 equals 13. 9 plus 4 equals 13. And you could go down to say 13 equals 13. But at this point, the numbers are small, so you know that's true. Okay? Now, there's a very common error that I see sometimes. And just one comment. I usually work from this side of the board to this side so people on this side of the room can see better. Try to stay out of the way of the board. But of course, there's room on this side if anybody wants to move over. Okay. Now, unfortunately, this is third semester calculus and you don't want to see it, so let me. Okay, now if we take the same problem we were just looking at, which I believe was is 3x plus 4 equals 13. Sure. I have seen and often see something like this. Okay, what's wrong with that? Well, First, there's no equal here, so you're not acknowledging that you're adding two fractions. This is wrong. Clarify a little bit why this is wrong. You put that as an equal sign and add the two sides, you get 3x plus 4 minus 3 equals 10. Now, is this 3 going to subtract from this 3? No, because this 3's got an x in front of it. And x could be any value. As x changes value, the value of 3x changes. So 3x minus 3 is not equal to x, except for one specific value of x. Does that make sense? So don't do this. Okay, avoid it and check. Okay. If you continue to solve this, that's just downright perverse. Well, no, it isn't. Okay, you get x equals 3, which checks with the original problem. Okay. If you had continued this one, you would have gotten x equals 6. Which is why I urge you to write out this step when you do this and put that equal sign in there. Okay. The way this is taught, people are told that you can't just subtract off this 3 because it's multiplied by x. People don't remember that. Okay. 40% of the people that come in to an MDE 60 class are going to want to do that. Okay. I see it all the time, even when we get to the test. Okay. So again, I don't like writing this out like so without the equal sign. And I really think you correct a lot of conceptual errors if you put an equal sign in here and write out then what this side plus this side gives you, what this side plus this side gives you, and solve the equation. Instead of assuming that that 3 cancels out that 3. That's a bad cancellation. You can't do it. It looks like this is divided if you write it like this, but you're not divided. Okay? Makes sense? So there are rules and you got to make sure you follow the rules. All right. Now, what do we got? X over 5 plus 4 equals 7. Okay. The way to solve this problem. Now, a lot of times people subtract 4 from both sides. Then they got x over 5 equals 3. And maybe they're sure what to do. Many of you are. Okay. But maybe that gets a little confusing. There's one thing that I want you to try to remember that nobody ever remembers. As much as I stress it, I will urge this a dozen times before your first test, and almost nobody's going to do it. Okay? When you have denominators, multiply both sides by common denominator. I'm not going to take the time to write it out, but I'll say you want the least common denominator if possible. In this case, there's only one denominator, it's 5. So we multiply both sides by 5. So what do you get? You get 5 multiplied by x over 5 plus 4. 5 times the quantity, x over 5 plus 4 equals 5 times 7. Okay? Meaning that 5 times quantity x over 5 plus 4, 5 multiplies this, 5 multiplies this. That's your distributive law of multiplication over addition. Something that's fundamental, everybody has seen it, but some people forget it. Okay? Another plug for writing out every step and why you're doing every step, so you don't forget it in 6 months. So you don't forget it when you need it, okay? Because I think people get in the habit of shortcutting the learning process by not writing out clearly what they're doing. You learn more and you learn it faster. You will make better grades on the test. Probably for about the same time input, because you won't keep making mistakes, okay? I mean, you still make mistakes. You're gonna see me make mistakes. I do it all the time. But I know how to detect them and how to find them, okay? Which is another good skill. Although I really shouldn't be making some of the mistakes I make. So you got 5 times x over 5 plus 5 times 4 equals 35. Now, how long did it take me to write an abbreviated distributive law there? Less than 5 seconds. It's worth those 5 seconds. Write it out and remind yourself that you're using the disblamable distributive law. Okay? Makes sense? Reinforce what you're doing, and you're going to be more likely to do it more quickly and more correctly the next time. Okay, so you multiply 5 by x over 5. Well, that gives you x, because this 5 is divided by this 5. This gives you 1 plus 20 equals 35. And then I'll put 3 dots. Don't put 3 dots down and write the solution. You should know what to do next. Subtract 20 from both sides, one way or another. Write it out like I did here. But it's going to give you x equals 15. If you get to the point where you're writing 3 dots, make sure it's because you know darn well what you do. You thought through in your head. You thought through every step. You used your imagination. You did it, because that's what you're telling me if you put those 3 dots there. And if you tell me wrong at this point, I'm not going to know why you. I might be able to guess. I might be able to conjecture. Anyhow, and then check. I'm not going to take the time because we've got about 13 minutes left. But if I put 13 in here, 13 divided by 5, 15 divided by 5 is 3. Add that to 4, you get 7. So you get 5 times 7, and that's equal to 5 times 7. Well, it checks here. Does it check in the original? Well, yeah. 15 divided by 5 is 3. Add 3 to 4, you get 7. Okay. But you want to write out those steps. Again, you want to get on to the next problem. You got time pressures, you got life presses on you. And sometimes you got to make hard choices about what to do with your time. This course is really important to you. Don't shortcut it. Shortcut something else. Now, if the house is on fire and you got this problem to do, take care of the fire first. Okay? I give you permission to put out fires before you do your math homework. Okay? Even if your math homework has to be late. Come to me, show me a picture of the fire. I'll give you an extra day to do your homework. Okay? You know. Somebody just got run over by a car, but they're still alive. Take care of them. Okay? Make sure they live. Okay. Get the idea, right? Write things out. I want to see that next time when I ask you to do problems like this. It won't be much different than these. You know, I'll always throw a curveball in because I want to keep people entertained.
Yes, and we'll have to set.
I'm getting out of order here. This would have been the third problem. But I wanted to emphasize this idea of multiplying both sides by a common denominator. And then incidentally, we used the distributive law. Okay. Now here, we got to use a distributive law. 2 times the quantity x minus 5. This means 2 multiplies every term in this equation. A term is something that's separated by the other things by a plus or a minus. Okay? So you have 2x minus 10 plus 6 equals 10. By the distributive law. And then 2x minus 4 equals 10. What do? We simplified, right? And then you go in. Well, you know, that's 14ths ago. And I'm abbreviating, it might be hard to read. Add above equations. Okay, I just put some down here. You're adding 2 equations. Then we simplify. And then 2x over 2 equals 14 over 2. And then x equals 7. Okay. I'm writing out divide both sides by 2. I tend to want to abbreviate that to saying divide by 2, but we want to emphasize both sides. So write that out, at least for now. If you write it out throughout the first few assignments, then you'll know it and you won't really have to write it out in later assignments. Okay? I urge you to write it out so you get it straight now so you don't get confused over your basic rules. Okay? Because after the first week or 2, you should have no confusion on solving any equation of this nature. And probably some of you don't. You probably, whatever confusion you might have had, you don't have anymore. And then check. Okay. Which was a good thing to do. I don't object to having had to do that. It wasn't a bad experience. So, okay, well, that's beside the point. We got one more problem to look at. And this one is 5 over x minus 2 equals 9. Okay. Okay. Now, I'm going to pause for a minute, see if anybody can tell me what my first step ought to be. And don't worry if you're wrong, but let's see if anybody can tell me. Okay, so we got the equation 5x minus 2 equals 9. Now, it's perfectly valid to add 2 to both sides. Nothing wrong with that. But if you do, most people that did that didn't know what to do next. It's still got the x in the denominator. Okay, well, what do you do if you got a denominator? You multiply both sides by the common denominator. What's the common denominator? Can you show me with your fingers? What's the denominator? Yeah, x. Okay, the other one I think was 5, right? So you could have shown me 5. This was x, right? A lot of times I'll ask you to show me a number. Okay, so 5 over x minus 2 equals 9. We multiply. I'm abbreviating this to reinforce what you have to do when you solve this equation, right? Do it, which nobody ever does. Some people get equations like this and they just don't solve them. Okay, can't get a solution. Okay, there are other ways, but so we write 5/x minus 2 equals 9 that we multiply by x, which is the denominator. And we get what? X times 5/x minus 2x equals 9x. Okay? Now, how does that simplify things? Well, that clears your denominators. You no longer have an x in the denominator, which is what was confusing everybody. Okay? You no longer have denominators, so you don't have to work with fractions. That alone is cause for joy. Okay? As on the previous problem, we had fractions, all of a sudden we didn't have fractions. You multiply both sides by a common denominator, and you don't have to work with fractions. And if you have your variable in the denominator, it comes up into the numerator where it's much easier to handle. So x times 5/x, this x is divided by this x. I'll talk more in detail about why that works. How you get here. Now, this may be a little unfamiliar, depending on what kind of problems you've seen before. But what do you do when you have a problem like this? Okay. I'm gonna add 2x to both sides. The way you want to do it is write out 2x equals 2x with the equal sign. If you add these equations, add this side to this side, you get 5 minus 2x plus 2x equals 9x plus 2x, which gives you 5 equals 11x. Okay. Now you can do it directly from here, but people try to do 5 plus 2x and get 7x. I see it all the time. Don't do that. I recommend you write out this step as I've recommended several times already. So you usually want to see x on the left-hand side. It's not necessary. But just to make it more familiar, I'll write 11x equals 5. You can always flip the two sides. And then you do 11x over 11 equals 5/11. And you get x equals 5/11. And that's a little weird, so you definitely want to check that. But next time, we're probably going to talk some about fractions, because that's another point where I see people coming into this course who have some real weakness with fractions. Part of the problem there, I believe, is you see fractions, you learn to do them in 5th grade, and then somebody puts a calculator in your hand and you never work with fractions again. And you don't know how to deal with them. Okay. And then unless you take some pretty heavy algebra later and it comes back to you, you're done with fractions and you can't do it. Okay. So we're not going to worry about the details of that check at this point before we deal with some fractions. Fair enough? Okay, so once more, if you're a distance student, hopefully you've been through this whole thing and you've done what I've asked people to do. Okay, in typical class, there'll be several times when I'll show you, ask you to do a little thing. Here it is. Okay, everybody seems to have this. We'll do a little bit more with that, and then we'll go on to something else. It's one way that you can approach the course. Okay, I talked earlier about other ways you can approach the course, but the videos are being posted for this reason. That's,
Yeah.